Nobody likes me sometimes. So my name is Kat Hart. I am the director here at the Loveland Business Development Center. This is our third in our series of support for the Loveland Artist Studio Tour. I got that in the right order. And we're really excited to be here tonight. This is going to be a really unique interactive session. So I hope you all are caffeinated. You've gotten some snacks. And for our people that are online, I will be kind of hopping back and forth between the two rooms, like I said, so that I can participate directly with you while everyone here is doing some of the role plays and group discussions and things like that. So it'll be really interesting to see how this all plays out. Everyone that's here in person has a wonderful note sheet that's prepared so that you can kind of follow along and kind of take some notes as we go through this. And everyone that's participating online should have received the PDF version of that about half an hour ago. If you didn't, check your email. You're here, so you probably at least got one email from me. So with all of that being said, I'm going to kick it over to Amelia, who is with the Loveland Artist Studio Tour.
Yeah, I got it. So for those of you who are not on the studio tour, we're glad that you're here because this is stuff that all artists can actually benefit from. But in case you're not familiar with the studio tour, because I know there's some new names and faces online, the Loveland Studio Tour is in its 13th year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, 13th year. It is something that Billy Colson actually started many years ago. And 13 years ago. Oh, man, we're so good at math. And it's something that it allows the Loveland community and the surrounding communities in northern Colorado to get a chance to see studios and working spaces of artists, and also get to experience some of our main gallery areas in a different way than what they would normally be able to on an everyday visit. So that is what the studio tour is all about. There are studio tours all over the United States that happen, and every single one does them a little differently. And so it's kind of neat to learn from each other, see what everyone else is doing. But one of the main things that a studio tour needs is we need our artists to feel comfortable with customer engagement. So that is what we're talking about tonight. So before we get started, I wanted to ask some icebreaker questions. And so folks online, you guys can pop it in the chat and we can see the things that you are commenting with. So please keep it nice, you know. Be kind because we can see it. But I was curious if we could just have some, pop out answers of what is your biggest fear when it comes to talking to people about your art? Just think about it for a minute. Maybe something will come up right away.
I don't talk too much.
Okay. So Rhonda's afraid she's going to talk too much.
So.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what else? What else is kind of like looming in your mind as we start this discussion?
I feel less nervous when they're coming to my house, but when it's like a gallery open event or something and someone's standing there looking at your painting, I never know if I should like walk up to them or not.
Yes. So just that kind of uncertainty, like, are they ready to engage with me? Are they not? Am I gonna do this wrong? Right? Like we're afraid we're gonna do it wrong, and so that's another big one. What else?
That's great.
Well, I think it's important to engage them in a way in which you start to discover, what really their hot buttons are.
Yeah.
And what interests them, and so gaining a little bit of trust and then asking the right kind of questions without prying too much.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about.
The girls on the screen
Yes.
had imposter syndrome.
Oh, imposter syndrome. Yeah. Not any good at this. Imposter syndrome.
Oh.
How many people here deal with imposter syndrome? Meaning you're like, somebody at some point is going to figure out that I am a big old phony. Anyone?
Sure. Right here.
3 times a day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's so common. Any entrepreneur that I know personally deals with this. And it's just something we have to personally deal with and mentally figure out and everything. Okay, so here's another one for you real quick. Who here has sold art? Okay, so we got some. Okay. Oh,
Okay. What about
wonderful.
online? Okay, I saw Gloria raised her hand.
Okay. Gloria raised her. Okay,
Mhm.
so
I can't see Joan.
oh,
Yeah.
and Gloria, and yeah, okay, yes,
Yep.
Joan has.
Okay.
All right. So a majority of us have sold artwork. How did it happen?
Michael online.
Yeah. How did you do it? Just go ahead and shout it out. Like what happened to make it happen?
I asked him if I could wrap it up for him.
So Billy just asked if she could wrap it up, and she closed it right there. What else? Does anyone have any other stories?
Into me versus me having to try to whittle it from them.
So they got in touch with you like via email.
Emails online, at shows, they've come to me because they see a piece that they're interested in versus me going and trying to talk somebody into it.
Okay.
Looks like Joan online has had some success with markets, displays,
Uh-huh.
and in person.
Yeah.
It's like a combination there.
Okay. So here's another question for you. How many of you, when you're selling art, have you had previous engagement with that person? Two. All right. So would you say the majority like previous engagement, or it's like first time someone sees you and they're like, oh, come on in.
Come on in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have a seat. Yeah. So yeah.
Some of the times, yes, some of the times it's the first time you've ever met.
Yes.
I try to read body language.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes it's people you've talked with before. Sometimes they might be repeat people that, you know, they love your work, they love, you know, talking with you, and then they'll come back and buy again. Sometimes it's like someone completely out of the blue that you're like, I don't even know where you came from, but I'm glad you're here. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to get a feel for like what people's experiences have been in regards to customers, whether they're all friends, whether they're people you do know, you don't know, that kind of thing. So, all right. So one of the things we wanted to talk about first when it comes to customer engagement is at a gallery, so never met the buyer. Yeah, sometimes that happens to me, you know, at various gallery settings too. Sometimes you never actually get to meet the buyer, and you're just kind of working with the gallery to, you're basically trusting them to take care of the customer as opposed to you. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about with customer engagement, we need to get our roles right. Who is the customer? Who is the artist? And the reason this is so important is because if you get the roles reversed as far as who's doing what, it becomes really awkward and weird and not very successful. So one of the things that I've learned in my time doing customer service things, not only as an artist, but also in other retail experiences, it's important to remember that the artist is the expert, not in everything. They are not an expert of everything, so don't do that. You know, obviously, we might not know plumbing, we might not know, but you are the expert of your work. You are the expert of your signature style that you use, the way that you're creating work. You're the expert, so you can come across as the expert regarding your own work. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, it's really important to believe that, to own it, to tell yourself, write it down, say it in the mirror, I'm an expert, I can do this. And then the other thing too is you are the guide for people when they're coming to the studios or when they're in your space. You're not only an expert of your work, but especially if you are in your own studio space, you're an expert of that space. So you can guide them through it. You can be someone who can help them during that entire experience. The other thing too that the artist is you're the person that's serving. Okay, you're the person that's actually helping, and you're a problem solver, as opposed to the idea that the customer is helping you. Let's just get that all out of you. Just forget that, okay? You are helping the customer. And so that's just a really important thing to grab a hold of, to understand. And it was funny, I had a conversation with my business coach not too long ago, and I was kind of feeling all defunct about something. I don't even remember what it was. And it was because I forgot that what I was working on was serving my collectors. And so when we reverse the roles and want our collectors and our customers to serve us, then all of a sudden it feels icky. It feels laborious, and it feels almost impossible. Whereas if you're going at it from the perspective of, I am here to serve my customers and my collectors. I like to call them collectors because they're buying art, right? So when you go about it that way, it helps with your whole attitude about it, with the engagement. It's a whole different perspective. So I have a question. Let's see who can answer. Who can tell me what a customer is? It's not a trick question. Who's a customer?
Anybody that's breathing.
Anyone that's breathing, absolutely.
That's
Yes.
good. That's good. Anyone with a wallet?
Anyone that might have 2 cents, yeah. And they might not have 2 cents at the time you meet them, but maybe they'll have 2 cents later.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's basically any human being is a customer, and they're not hiding, and you don't have to find them. They're there, and they're walking around everywhere.
In fact, sometimes they might be a referrer
Yeah,
rather than a direct customer even.
absolutely. Yes, yeah.
So
And-
just assume that everybody is kind of fair game.
Absolutely, yeah. You need to be very careful not to prejudge and assume that when someone walks into your space or whatever that oh nope, definitely not. Don't do that because you don't know. You don't know. Customers, also a couple other things about customers. Not only are they human beings, just like we are, they have likes, they have dislikes, they have personalities, they have quirks. They have a certain type of temperament. Maybe they really like to engage with people. Maybe they're a little bit more shy and reserved and held back. And so every single customer comes with their own little package of interestingness, if that's a word. And every single customer is different. And so that's another thing just to remember, that like we could go ahead and we could give you a formula, but since every customer is different, that's not necessarily going to be the best way to do it.
Two of our Vegas collectors look like they live under a bridge.
Yes.
And I mean, in their dress and everything about them, they come in and they are some of our biggest collectors.
Mhm.
They spend their money on art and our clothes.
Mhm. Yeah.
I've had an experience a couple times where the kids are interested in what's happening in the booth or whatever, and then that draws the adult in. So engaging with the kids and not just blowing them off because they're little kids. And, you like to draw all of that kind of stuff, and then the parents come in, oh, okay, and I've had a couple sales because of that.
Sure.
Yeah, and as we look at this whole process of setting up these conversations and everything, that's what can make it really difficult and intimidating, right? Is because we're dealing with all kinds of different people that might like our particular art or what we have to offer on that day. And so, when Amelia mentions, there's no formula for dealing with this, there really isn't a whole lot of formula other than you have to be able to think on your toes and really humanize whoever you're talking to, and just not be afraid of them because they're a person just like you. And for all you know, this might be the first time that they are seriously looking at purchasing art, and they are just as scared about the process as you might be at the idea of someone buying your work. So that whole, don't be afraid of the spider and the snake, like it's probably just as afraid of you. That applies to customers as well.
What Amelia said, as far as taking control or being the artist, introduce yourself as the artist. Say, I'm the artist of this work. If you have any questions about it, my process or my inspiration, lead them in to those kind of questions.
Yeah, that way you can help them know what might be helpful to ask. Is it okay if I say,
Sure.
am I projecting enough? Okay, good. Well, so,
Yeah.
like
Sure.
standing's great, kind of. So one of the things we wanted to kind of go over is just kind of like a list. Like if you look on your handout after we talk about customers, we're kind of looking at tips for starting a conversation with a customer. And this is important stuff just to remember, because every customer is a human being. So you're going to start a conversation with a customer like you would any other human being. What, like, if you know them, the conversation might start a little bit differently. If they're a brand new face, then you're going to start at a different point. Does that make sense? But you're not going to treat them any differently than your friends or any other stranger on the street. And like some of the things that I always fall back on, my dad was an insurance salesman, so I feel like I learned this very, very early on, because this is just like how he interacted with everybody. Smile. Just, yeah, and I know some, like, depending on the mask situation, you may have to smile with your eyes, but people can still see it. They can sense that type of that feeling from you. So smiling, making eye contact, and sometimes that can be really difficult. But it's really key to get someone's attention to make that eye contact. Introduce yourself, like Billy was saying, and for the studio tour, and specifically, welcome them into your space. Don't have them you don't want them to feel like they're intruding, but you want them to feel like, I am so glad you're here. Welcome. Come on in, make yourself comfortable. Maybe give them some directions about where to go, where things are located, and then you can give them space just to kind of explore, look around, because you don't want to bombard.
But before you send them off, when you do your introduction, one of the things that I'm horrible about is getting people's names.
Yes.
The number one thing that everyone loves to hear is their own name. And so when you do that introduction and you're welcoming them into your space, you say, hi, my name is Kat. This is my gallery. This is my space. It's great to meet you. Can I get your name? And that way you've got their name. And as they start to wander around and stuff, and you give them that space to start to engage with your art and kind of absorb everything, just check on them and use their name when you check on them, because that's going to get their attention and that's going to help build that relationship. It's going to make both of you more comfortable with each other. But the best thing that any customer wants to hear is their name. So make sure you get their name, because I know personally I am horrible at getting people's names, which is really bad with how much I network. Because I go up to people and I'm like, wow, I know I've met you like 5 times. Totally don't remember your name. So make sure you're getting their name as well as giving your own.
Okay, so here's a question. Maybe someone can answer this if you have some experience with this. So I can usually remember names pretty well. So this is not necessarily a difficulty for me, but my husband, people say their name and he's like, I have no idea. Like the minute it's out of his head. And some of us have that problem. Names are really a struggle. So does anyone have any tips or tricks for trying to either remember names or just in that kind of situation? I just want you to think creatively for a moment.
Anyone that's online, that if you do have any of these tips, feel free to unmute yourself and let's just hear you pop in with any of your suggestions if you have them, because it might be hard to kind of type some of this stuff.
I find it hard to just get a quick name on Don. It's Don Dunch. But Don with a fancy shirt. Then I've got more. Don with a fancy shirt.
I use word association.
Yeah,
Association,
so
okay.
Amelia with the green shirt, or with the glasses.
Yeah.
Something more than just the name, because the name can come and go.
Right.
And sometimes if we've had a quick introduction, I'll jot it down.
Right.
Right, that's what I was gonna say,
Yeah.
especially with the tour that I thought, I'm just collecting names and just write it casually down.
Is it worth it for you to have a little palm-sized notebook then, if you know that names are something that you struggle with, so that you can just scribble it down real quick as they kind of turn their back to walk away and check out what you've got to offer.
Right.
That might be a tool that you can use to help yourself.
You can also, one thing that I've found very helpful is if you can converse and say their name at least 3 times back and forth, it will stick a lot better. Or if you have to be a little weird and whisper it to yourself 3 times after they're gone, it's totally fine. But it's that number 3, for some reason, our brains are able to process that better when you say it a couple more times.
I feel better if I get a person last name, rather than Don Riley. I can remember better when I get more.
Yeah. So So think through those things. Think about yourself, what your tendencies are, where your strengths and your weaknesses are, and have a game plan to be able to do that portion of it.
So before we move on to anything else here, who has trouble just starting up organic conversations, like when you're out and about? Like, okay, so you already know that that's something. So the fact that you're self-aware of that is really, really great. Now, leading into something like the studio tour, what you may want to do to kind of gear yourself up to get in that conversational kind of mode, especially we've got about 2 weeks until the tour, right? Is to start to make small talk while you're out running your errands. So make sure that when you go to the grocery store, you actually engage in a conversation with the cashier rather than doing self-checkout or just, quickly keeping your head down and not engaging. But starting up those small conversations while you're out and about in unfamiliar territory will make it that much easier when you're in your space with your art and you are the expert to start those conversations. That's just one more thing that you can do to start to build that up in yourself. And it's a small thing, but I know that some people I know really do struggle with engaging with anyone out in public. I have some friends that as soon as I start up a conversation with a random, server or cashier or something like that, they're like, shh, stop talking to them. Why are you so friendly to everyone? Yeah. But it's just something that I do because I know that I can get stuck in my own little bubble of just going about my day. And so it helps me. And then when I'm in professional settings, it's that much easier for me to talk to new people. But
sometimes I really look for that person's something special that they have, like their hair looks really cool, or I really like their earrings, or and then truly it has to be honest. It can't be just to compliment somebody, but a lot of times I'll look for something that they really are, that I really like about what they have on or what they look like or whatever. And I'll try to say something about that. And boy, does that ever engage people if you're honest and if if you show that you are being truthful about that.
Honest compliments are huge. My entire networking strategy is built around trying to get people to talk to me by something interesting that I'm wearing. I will wear a bright colored dress. I will wear something I made. Earrings,
Your shirt?
Yeah. My bright blue shirt. I walked into Billy's gallery one day and I was wearing this beautiful bright blue shirt. I almost wore that same shirt tonight. And she took me.
This painting.
Yeah.
It's the exact same color as your shirt. You're gonna love it.
Exactly. and you know what? I walked out of the gallery with that painting that day. It's in my office right now. But those are all things that you can do and different tactics. Like I said, I use it as a networking thing because especially when I'm feeling low energy and I really don't want to be somewhere, I will wear something extra bright and loud. That way people will come up and talk to me instead of me having to go out and talk to people. People are surprised when they realize how much of an introvert I actually am. Because I'm right on the line between introvert and extrovert. And anymore, I'm more on the introvert side. But by wearing something that lets people engage with me, like I would love your strategy of, complimenting something that I'm wearing because I'd be like, oh, she noticed me. What's so nice? Like as a customer, that's how I would feel.
Well, let me ask the question, because women have a lot more opportunity to dress their jewelry and whatever. It's very noticeable, and very engaging. Most of us guys are pretty boring.
That's your own fault. I'm sorry.
Let me ask all the ladies, and maybe I ought to ask the guys, but if you're talking to a guy, it's pretty hard to say, yeah, that was amazing.
Cool necktie is a good one.
Yeah.
I notice shoes. I notice when a man has like snazzy shoes or something on, like or socks. Yes, socks.
One of my questions is, do you live in the area or are you just visiting?
There we
So
go.
they might be from Fort Collins, and I never ask a question where the answer could be yes or no. It's, do you live here or are you visiting from someplace else? Oh, I live in Fort Collins. Oh, so it's not yes or no. Do you live here? You want some help? No. No yes or no question.
Yes.
How about them Broncos?
Yeah.
Right. Well, so one of the things I'll
Especially if
do,
they're able, like,
yeah, a lot of gentlemen that come into like at various festivals, like, that's a little bit more of a casual setting. And like, since the studio tour is during the day, most people are not going to be like super dressed up. Some of them might be. A lot of them are just wearing their everyday clothes. And I know a lot of guys wear really fun t-shirts, and they might have a sports t-shirt on, or they might, so you can absolutely like, this happens to my husband all the time. He has Penn State stuff because we grew up in like that area. He didn't actually even go to school there, but all of a sudden some complete stranger will be like, "Hey, where you are?" And he's like, "Penn State." Like, so I mean, you can connect on those little things like, "Oh, are you a Kansas City fan?" Or, "Are you from there?" And you can find ways like that to talk with people as well.
Oh, Don, Michael said wear a snazzy hat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, men can wear hats.
And you
Absolutely.
can, if they're at the studio tour, just you can ask them, have you stopped by at some of the other studios? Do you know about the tour? And some people are accidentally finding it.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
And then that gives you a chance to be even more of an expert because you're like, look at all the wonderful art that's going on right now.
Yeah, and then these next 2 weeks, you can make yourself an expert as well, not only in your own voice and art form, but and also in your studio, but also make yourself an expert in the studio tour as well by engaging with the resources that we have ready for you, so that when people come into your space, you can serve them well by giving them help with the resources that we have, like, oh, hey, like this, I would totally, like, this is a really easy route to go here. If you are familiar with the artists that are close to you, suggesting those other artists, or saying, if let me have you, check this out, you can look on the website or whatever. So yeah, using all of those types of resources and making yourself an expert in that. Again, it's a trust building type of thing. One of the things customers really need is they need to connect with you, they need to trust you, and obviously they need to like what you have to offer. But trust is a pretty big component when it comes to purchasing artwork, for sure. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about starting conversations, and we can, I'm trying to think what else. So we talked about giving them space so that they can engage with your work. And things of that nature. And then one of the things, and Billy talked a little bit about this when it came to our staging workshop, is after you've given them some time to acclimate to the area, they've had some time to look around, reconnecting with them after they've had some space, just to check in on them. Hey, what did you see? Like, is there anything that really caught your eye, or do you have a favorite? Or finding other things that you can, simply build that connection with. Maybe it's not art related at all. Maybe that's when you start to engage with, have you gone to any of the other studios? Are you from around here? But just, continuing that type of connection process. And you can, if it's helpful for you, you can write down a whole list of questions and just keep reviewing those for the next 2 weeks, so that they just kind of pop right out, instead of you going, I don't know what to say, and then hiding and eating all your food. You don't.
So a lot of us are in really small studios. So how do you give them space without leaving them?
So the way that I give space, so like this is a great example would be a 10 by 10 booth. You can't go very far, right? so in a 10 foot by 10 foot space, the way I give my customers room is I go back to doing something else. I either walk over to the other wall and I straighten some paintings, or I start working on my demo piece again, or I go behind the corner and I work on getting my packaging supplies put together, or something like that. So I'm close by enough that I can know if they need me, but I'm still giving them ample space. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Not breathing down their neck the whole
Yeah, not
time.
sitting there going,
Like,
so do you like me on my artwork?
So my son and I for years went to the Southeast Wildlife Expo in Charleston every year. Same kind of deal, 10 by 10 space. We would go into there and talk to each other about things, but carefully in case the artist was around. But then if they come into the booth, I just wanted you to know, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Well, when you don't intend to buy, the first thing you do is start feeling trapped. And so unless you really want to stay there and look at something, you're like, oh, thank you, and then you promptly move on. Any suggestions on how to make that different for the customers so that they don't end up feeling that way? Because you feel like you ought to engage with them, but then if you do, you might scare them off because they didn't intend to buy, and so then they feel bad that they, like they're taking up their space in your
There's a lot
time.
more people that come and don't buy than do.
Right.
So we're used to that.
But,
yeah.
but as an individual customer, if you just want to look and the artist is right there, you feel bad that you're not being able to do that for them.
Well, and that's why these tips aren't talking about, we haven't talked anything about really telling about like your art or anything. We're talking about just engaging with them as a human. They are another human being in front of you, and like you don't even have to necessarily bring up the art immediately.
I don't think it should ever be about the art in the first 10 minutes of your conversation.
Yeah, that initial few back and forth statements, keep it about something that is much more surface level so that you can start to collect information about who they are as a person. And that will help you gauge if you need to steer that more towards a sales conversation or more towards a long-term relationship kind of conversation. Because, if you remember back to some of the other things that we've talked about, and one of the general rules of sales is that it is 7 points of contact until you make a sale. So you may not be making a sale with that person. You might just be making a friend that likes your art. And that's okay. Because if you keep engaging with them over time, the likelihood that they're going to end up becoming a customer increases. But if you start that off immediately where you're like, hey, just let me know if I can help you with any of the art or anything, that does immediately shut that down so that they do want to escape and they do feel trapped. But if you start engaging with them just as a person, and authentically, that starts building that relationship. And that's really what we're talking about here.
That's such a good, I think that's a great point. Like starting off, and I remember hearing this in sales too, just at different retail places, that it's not necessarily the best thing to start off with. If you have any questions, just let me know. Like
That's almost a sales killer.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like you want to break that relationship, do that. But like what Eva was saying, like one of the things that, and that question is absolutely appropriate a little bit further down the line. Okay. But like that beginning conversation, maybe what would feel good for Eva and her, was it your son? Would be to like for the artist to ask, so what brings you in today? Like that way she can be really open and honest about her purpose there, as opposed to feeling like she has to be something other than what she is. Like,
Are you enjoying the show?
yeah. Like,
Or, hey,
what
have
brings
you ever
in
seen
today?
this
Yeah.
technique
Really
before?
blind question.
Yeah. And then that way, like when Eva can say, hey, we're visiting, we really enjoyed your work, then that can start a conversation that does not feel pressured at all. It allows you to engage with that artist in a way that feels like this is actually serving my purpose. It's solving the problem that I actually came in to have solved, which is to learn more about this art. My problem wasn't that I wanted to buy art or I needed to buy pieces. I just wanted to learn more. So, and as an artist, there's so many, and this goes into what we'll talk about a little bit later, but there's so many different problems that a customer can present. And not all of them is because they're missing wall, like they need something on their wall. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We have the opportunity at all different levels to serve these customers and these collectors in solving their problems. And sometimes it's buying art, sometimes it's connecting with the artist, sometimes it's gaining information. But like Kat was saying before, sometimes that leads them to a sale, but it takes some time.
So some of the techniques, just so that we don't lose these on the chat, Joan says she used to keep index cards with comments and then shuffle through them when she got stuck for comments. So, as you're on the studio tour, that might be something, if you are keeping a little notebook or something where you're going to keep people's names because that's what you need to do, maybe you also need to jot down a few like conversation starter questions so that you can help yourself engage with people. I really like that idea. And then Laura just emphasized that point of focus on building the connection, not making the sale. So, I mean, that really just hits what we've been talking about here. So are we about at the point where we need to kind of break apart and do the role plays? Do you think?
Yeah,
To do
we
just,
can just do a
I
little bit
think
of
I think we
role
can probably do about 5 minutes of that just to get people just kind of interacting with each other. So I'm going to mute the TV here, and then everyone here that's in person, you guys are going to talk to each other. I'm going to run into the other office, and then I will engage with everyone that's online. So you'll see me on the other screen there in just a second. Okay, everyone that's online, it's time for you to unmute. I muted the TV in there so they can't hear what we're talking about, but I want to see your beautiful faces. I want to hear your beautiful voices. And let's just do some talking. I mean, I don't know that I've met any of you in person. So if you saw me walk into your gallery, how would you start a conversation with me?
I love your necklace.
Oh, thank you so much. I got it at the Gem and Mineral Show last weekend. It's amber. It's really pretty.
Ah, it's of the earth.
Yeah, that absolutely works. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. So what about each of you? So you know, Laura, Joan, Megan, you guys have all been really active in the chat and everything. What is a good way to engage you, and Michael as well? I see you on here now too.
Hello.
I think sometimes maybe not necessarily drawing attention to your art and your product, but because sometimes you walk into, let's say, a booth at a festival and people kind of jump on you with their elevator speech, which is good. It gives you, I think, good information about what they do. And if that's like, as I walk around as an artist, that is kind of what I want to know. Like, hey, this is cool. How'd you do this? I'm not going to buy it, but I appreciate you. Whereas I think if I was walking in to try and connect with an art piece, that might come across as more noise.
Okay. What about you, Michael?
What was the question?
Oh, just how is a good way to engage you as a customer? Like, first off, I see that piece behind you, and I was like, oh, that's a really pretty tree. So what's a good way for you to be engaged? Because a lot of times the way that it's easy for you to feel at ease being engaged is a good way for you to engage with other people. So what if you were looking around at a gallery, what would be a good way to approach you?
I guess, I don't know. I like talking about my work and what the meaning is behind it, and then my process as well. But I guess I'd start the conversation off just like, you know, engaging the customer, not necessarily going for the art right away, just having conversation.
But if you're the customer, how do you want to be engaged?
I always like compliments. That always works. And then, yeah, I guess kind of what my interests are, kind of asking about my interests.
Okay. Let's see, Gloria, I saw you pop up with a really big smile earlier. What about you? How do you like to be engaged, Gloria?
Well, I've been to a zillion, if we're talking about art shows or galleries. I'd like to be acknowledged that I'm there and make some eye contact, but I'd like to look around before I start talking about anything. So I think I want to be acknowledged that I'm there and it's hot today, or whatever is appropriate.
Okay. And so we all have a little bit different approach, it sounds like. I know, you know, it's a little bit hard to do these one-on-one conversations like this in the webinar format. But let's see, who haven't we talked to yet? We haven't talked to Joan yet. Joan, how do you like it when, or how do you like people to engage you when you're out shopping, or if you're looking for art or something like that? What's a good way to kind of bring you in and make you feel welcome? Oh, you're muted.
So I have a problem. Sometimes I'll go in a store and it's like I'm invisible. The clerks or whatever will talk to other people and welcome them in, but then I'm kind of invisible, and I don't like that necessarily. I don't want to be bugged, but I don't want to be invisible. So
It's a fine line, right?
yes.
So do you have any ideas on how you can make sure that people feel welcome in your space, so that you do have the opportunity to engage with them and make them not feel invisible when they come in? Because that is a really horrible feeling, is to feel like you're invisible.
Yeah, well, I do I look them in the eye and say hello and welcome and tell them my name and try to get something happening right in the beginning. And then I just sort of direct them onto the art.
Okay.
Well,
And
someone said it earlier, you know, just smiling at someone is a huge step in the right direction. Yeah. Well, maybe not like that. They'll think you're weird, but.
I've got 20 years of dance experience. So like, you know, Vaseline on the teeth to make myself smile, kind of.
Well, you're rocking the lipstick. That's why your smile can really work.
Well, that too, but you know, plus right now I can see myself on camera, so I absolutely have to smile because I'm like, oh man.
I know. I think my resting face is not a smiley face, although I tend to smile a lot. So it's being aware that I'm content, but I'm not smiling. So I need to step it up.
Gloria, could you move your camera so that it's down more?
Yeah, we just see
the top of your head.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Now we can see your gorgeous face.
Yeah, right.
So I didn't realize we had two Joans on the call for some reason.
Yeah.
So Joan, tell me how you say your last name. I don't know how you say your last name. Utley?
Yeah, Utley.
Utley. Okay. So what really makes you and brings you in?
Well, you know, I am almost to a fault, shy. So, but I can start conversations pretty easy with just people. I've had people tell me that, but I'm not always the one that wants to talk first. And, but if I see something going on, you know, that interests me, I'll speak up or say something nice. So, you know, and I think it always works to give someone a compliment just to start out, you know, the jewelry, the lovely lipstick, what's that shade, you know, who cuts your hair? Yeah.
I mean, that'd be a great question for Michael, right? Who cuts your hair?
Yeah.
Good guess. Me. It's really hard.
So I'm curious, out of us that are on the webinar side here, who kind of qualifies themselves as an introvert or shy? Because they're not the same thing. Okay.
Introvert.
I'm definitely an introvert and kind of in the middle, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes like I had a big couple of weeks with Small Business Week and things like that. And I mean, I had so many people around me and I was so drained at the end of last week. Like I needed literally 5 straight days to recover. In fact, I'm even surprised I'm halfway coherent tonight because I'm so drained on that extrovert side of things. So you know, there's other things that you can do too, especially around the studio tour. I know that this isn't necessarily part of engaging and talking about those customer conversations, but you've got 2 weekends in a row where you're doing this studio tour, right? So you're going to have to find a way to make sure that you're recharging between those conversations if you are an introvert, so that you're not completely drained and that you can authentically engage that second weekend. So as one of those extra tips, and this is something that people inside aren't getting, make sure you are doing something that you're going to be able to recharge sometime during the week. That way you're ready and you're fresh for that next weekend. Because man, when introverts get all the way drained, I mean, I couldn't get off the couch for a couple of days. So I don't want to see that happen to any of you either, because then you're not going to be very smiley. You're not going to be very engaging with those people that come in that second weekend. And it may be that people don't find out about the tour until the second weekend of the tour. So you want to make sure that your energy is fresh and everything. And so one of those tips could even be something as simple as getting a good night's rest before the actual day of the tour. Because that can be just as important to how you end up reacting that whole day, right?
And I think it's important while you're in that setting to have little things that help you in the way of self-care, you know, some cookies or whatever, drinks, something that'll help you stay up, and, you know, even if it's peppermint oil to give a sniff now and then, you know, I used to do that with my students, and it helps.
I'm recruiting at least one and maybe two people, not on the same days, to be there with me. That, and my studio is down in the basement. So to have someone upstairs that sort of welcomes people and bring them downstairs. And that way also, if you just need to step out or go to the bathroom, you can do it. And someone else is there who's enthusiastic about your work and say, and if there's a question they can't answer, then you're, 2 minutes away.
Yeah, and that's something that we talked a lot about with the 2 weeks ago with the Staging for Success, is having that helper that can help you kind of stabilize that energy too.
Right.
So I think I'm going to wrap this up right here. We're going to have another chance to do another little session like this where we kind of discuss what's going on and stuff. So feel free to mute yourself again and hide your camera if you want to, but everyone can see you on the TV in there if you want to keep it on. So I'm going to run back in there and we'll get moving on to the next sections.
Thanks.
Conversations.
No, it looks like all the conversations are going really well in here. Okay, so if we can reconvene over here. Hello? I'm like standing up over here. I don't have my high heels on today. They're just little baby heels. So I'm glad to hear the conversations going on in here. One of the cool things we actually talked about online that you guys maybe not hadn't thought about in terms of just general engagement over the course of the studio tour. So the studio tour is 2 weekends in a row, right? And a lot of you self-qualify as introverts, which means that you are drained in social situations. So you need to be thinking about what you're going to do between the first weekend and the second weekend to make sure that you're fresh for that second weekend. Because if you are an introvert and you are truly drained by that second weekend, you're going to have trouble smiling. You're going to have trouble engaging in those conversations and being authentic and being welcoming, right? Yeah. Yeah, like right now I am coming off of 5 days of recovery because I had a week of National Small Business Week, and then the following week I had the Workforce Symposium, which was like, I saw probably 400 people over the course of 7 days. And like my inner introvert is just like crushed right now. Like I laid on the couch for 5 days. But so when I think about like the studio tour and I think about how deeply personal like my creative pursuits are to me, and having people come in and like judge and comment and things like that on me and what that would do to me and my energy, I encourage you to make sure that you have something planned so that you can kind of recharge yourself by the time that second weekend comes by. Oh, we've got some comments here.
Well, you probably know what I'm gonna say, but get on your bicycle, go for a bike ride.
Yes,
I guarantee
exercise
you, no
endorphins,
matter
yes.
how bad you feel, you're gonna feel great in 15 minutes.
Fresh air, exercise, endorphins, that is absolutely something. And it's a solo activity too. So if you're an introvert, that can be a really good way to recharge. Honestly, even dumping yourself into your art for an afternoon and just planning that like, hey, this, Wednesday afternoon is going to be my recharge or whatever, whatever that takes for you. Jill, what do you have?
I was gonna say it's not the same thing, but do something you really love that's not art or not, well, your art might be what recharges you, so I can't say that.
Yeah.
But whatever it is you don't normally do to recharge somehow, we typically are finishing some more pottery or firing some more kilns and doing stuff like that, but it's best to do something else also, because then it kind of changes up you're not just doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm in studio tour for the next 4 weeks, so it's like, okay.
Yeah.
We call hiking and birding.
Take a nap.
Yeah.
Just go ahead, lay in your bed, take a nap, read a book, whatever recharges you. That's such a good point, and it's really easy to like let all of the business aspects of the tour and I need to get back with this person, but write it all down. But know that it will be okay. Take care of yourself. Have something planned maybe on a Wednesday or something like that after you've had like some time to kind of process everything.
Well, if you get their emails the first weekend, you can send them an email during the week and say, thank you very much for stopping at my studio.
Yep.
We're open the second weekend. And I was gonna mention, Billy brought her cards with her, but the first weekend, if you're not handing them something when they walk out your door, you're losing out. Because there's a lot of people on the tour, so make sure they remember who you are.
Yeah. Bring your friends, bring your family next weekend. I'd love to see you again. That kind of comment or something.
Such a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. That just happened to come
Or
up
if
during
you're
our
gonna have
conversation. So.
Maybe one new piece the next week, or something different.
Something you're working
Yeah,
on.
Something you're working on, yeah, I'm gonna be done with this or that.
Yeah.
We have
So-
different people demoing, so if you're sharing a studio, have different people demoing.
So we were thinking about we do ceramics. We were thinking about doing a firing in between the weeks, so that by the second weekend, we would have a kind of an open of the kiln.
Yeah, and that's something fun you can share with them, say, and
Come back
sharing
and
that
see it.
type of enthusiasm that you feel when you're opening the kiln. Like it's terrifying, but it's so
Right.
amazing.
Even if you're glazing it the first weekend or something, and then you come back the second weekend and see it fired. It's hard to do, but throw it and do it. 'Cause you
No,
don't have the
yeah,
time.
pieces in progress.
Yeah.
Such a good idea. Yeah.
So I want to make sure that we have enough time to get through our discussions here. So we've talked about, the idea that we're engaging with our customers as humans, right? We're not engaging with them as someone who has a wallet, right? So now that we are kind of a little bit more comfortable and we're just thinking about how do we start these conversations without turning it into a sale, let's think about what problems does art solve for humans? Okay, because if we're talking to our customers as humans, and that's all we're really trying to do, and we're trying to be the experts and we're trying to solve a problem here, then ultimately, what problems does art solve for humans?
Makes them happy.
Happy. I want to see, let's see. Oh, and we've got a question here that we can answer in a little bit here. How many visitors usually come through the tour? I'm not sure. That's going to be a Jill, Billy, or Amelia question.
2019, I think we gauged a couple thousand.
That's the downtown location.
That's the downtown.
Yeah.
That
And
outlying
outlying hundreds.
We had probably, in 2019, we probably had 200 to 250 walk through the house.
Okay. So it depends on if you're in a home studio or if you're in
It
one of the
also
downtown
depends on how you
locations.
advertise and who you ask to come, and 90% of ours was our neighbors.
Yeah, I went to the neighborhood
Yeah.
and put a flyer on their door.
Yeah.
Actually an invitation.
It was an invitation, handwritten invitation.
Yeah, people that have studios, like in a neighborhood, seriously, like if they don't have to get in a car and all they have to do is walk, they're like the lowest hanging fruit people.
They want to see your
We're
house
mailing
anyway.
I know.
500 of these.
Right?
Yeah.
From our place. We're
Yeah.
mailing 500, these are names I've collected, but your doctor, your massage therapist, your chiropractor, your, anybody that you do business with, your vet, your dentist, those are all people that you know.
Yeah.
And invite them. You've already got a relationship with them, and so invite them. Your hairdresser. The soccer team, if you have kids in soccer, you know, just people that you go to church with. Invite them.
So, you know, coming back to this discussion question here of, you know, what problems does art solve for humans? So obviously it makes us happy, right? What else does art do for us?
We need beauty in our life. That's why we paint flowers, you know, that's why we grow flowers, why we do things, but we need beauty in our life. And that creates a beauty in our life.
Gives a
Makes us
point of
happy.
expression.
Okay. Explain that a little bit more.
Well, for the artist, we're expressing our history, our thoughts, our ideas, what we perceive, but then the person who's looking at that art can be expressing through it.
So it's almost like they're connecting with so maybe
Well,
it gives them a sense of
it may
connection.
be their own thoughts too.
Right, okay, so it gives them a way to express.
Yeah, Joan online said emotional connection. Laura said inspire curiosity.
Oh, that's a good one.
I know for me, you know, I've got several different creative pursuits that I've had over the years, but specifically with the dancing, it was a connection to the past and to history and to storytelling and to culture. Because it was, you know, traditional Mexican dance, and they're all very storytelling dances. And so like there's all kinds of stuff wrapped up in that that comes out in that type of art, in a performance type art.
So a connection to culture.
Yeah.
Okay. Connection to culture.
With clay, it can be a very functional part of your
Yes.
life, but in a beautiful way or a creative way.
Beauty and function kind of coming together.
Functional use. Very good. Yeah, let's be honest. It fills empty spaces on our walls. Fills a space that you're so tired of looking
I think there's an energy about it.
That's what I was gonna say, there's an
Yeah.
energy that you get with original art,
Right.
or a live performance, that you just don't get from a print, radio.
Oh, okay. Michael's got a good comment here online. Sending a message through the work to the viewer that elicits an emotion or gives them something to ponder.
So it's thought provoking.
Yeah, thought provoking. Yes.
And sometimes it's just a specific memory of either a person or a pet or whatever.
Right. Helps remember.
Yes.
Yeah. I actually, I remember a client of mine, she bought she told me like point blank, she's like, I don't like winter scenes. I just don't like them because they make me kind of sad. But it's funny, she ended up purchasing a piece that was a winter scene. And it was because it kind of helped her feel joy and feel just different feelings during winter. And so for her, like that ability
It's
to kind of have, it was transformational. That's what art does. Like, and we forget that a lot of times as artists because we live with it, we make it, we're like, whatever. And so we don't realize what the gifts that we have are giving to the people that purchase them. And like thinking through like what types of intangible gifts and value that the art is creating for their home. Like think about your own stuff that you've collected in your house. I'm assuming like some of you guys have collected some of your own work, or you've traded, not your own work, but other artists' work you've traded. And think about how what those pieces do for you. And how it changes the way you interact with your space, how it changes the way you interact with the people in your space. Like there's certain pieces in my house that because they're in my house, I'm a better mom. That's pretty valuable. Like, and we have to remember that's the kind of value that we're bringing with our artwork.
They tell stories too. I mean, and if you share your story about the painting, they're going to share that story with people that view your work in their home.
Yeah, because that story is what that connection is. And so you can start to see how some of these pieces that we've talked about today kind of start to build on each other, right? We're engaging with our customers as humans. We're trying to find out a little bit about who they are. And now we've kind of zoned out a little bit and we've kind of taken a 30,000-foot view here of, you know, what problems could that art potentially solve for that human that's walking through your gallery door. Okay, now we kind of take this to the next level. Okay, and now we think about, now that you can kind of imagine your customer as a human and think about what problems your art could solve for them, what is your responsibility and your relationship to that customer, and how has that changed or has that shifted in your perspective now that we've kind of talked through and thought through some of this stuff? So I'll let you kind of take this next part of the discussion here.
Yeah.
On that job in relationship to your customer.
So one of the things when we start to understand that our art can solve our customers' problems, the next part of the journey in engaging with a customer after you have done the initial connection with them is you get to find out what their problem is. You get to find out where they're at and where they want to be. Maybe it's a very functional issue, like we talked about, like, I really need a birthday present for so-and-so who's super duper hard to buy. That now you know where they are and you know where they want to be, okay? And your job then as the artist is to guide them along and help them get to where they want to be. So it's kind of fun when you think about it that way, right? So the other, some of the other things might be a little bit more difficult to uncover, so you need to ask questions. And like specific questions. And Kat talks, she's going to talk a little bit more about this in a couple minutes, in relation to cake. But that is this is a really important part to engaging with your customers. And Bridget, I know she's online there. One of the things that she talked about before we all came online is she's like, I'm so good at talking with people, but they walk away with nothing. What am I doing wrong? What's going on? This is the key component to being able to take it from being we really connect with each other. This is really fun. I like your artwork, to them walking out potentially with something if that's going to solve their problem. You got to find, take some time to figure out why they're there, what their problem is, where they want to be. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. So, and the one thing I wanted to stress though, when it comes to problems, is those can look like they could be very many different things. It could be they're curious and they want to learn more about the arts and love them. Maybe they need a piece of artwork for a space or for a gift or something like that. Maybe they are wanting to take their kids out and give them an educational experience in the arts and be able to do that. So just once you have a sense of why they're there and what problem they're trying to solve, you can guide them through to getting that answer. And like I said before, that's going to take some asking of questions. It's going to take a lot of listening. And this is where, you're going to ask some questions and then you're going to say, and what else? And you're going to ask some more questions, maybe repeat some things like back to make sure you understand what they're talking about, and keep asking more so that you can get a clear sense of that. And then when the time's appropriate, you can start giving them some solutions to their problems. Maybe it's like, oh, I'm so glad you're here with your children. Let's go ahead. I'm going to show you like how to actually throw on the wheel. Or come over here. I want to show you this piece I'm working on right now. Or like I know, like for Chris and I, we're going to have a kids corner. So we're going to have a space for kids to be able to do some artwork. If it's a different type of problem, you're going to address that in a different way. That makes sense? Thank you.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Do you want to talk about your general versus specific questions? Because I feel like that kind of leads right into it.
I want to talk about cake, actually. So I don't have cake. You don't have to be jealous if you're online. There is not cake here. So if you follow me on Instagram, cat.heart123, you'll see that I do a lot of cakes for people. Like that's another one of my creative outlets, right? And baking in itself can be an art, right? And when I say I make cakes, I don't mean I just put it in a pan. I mean like I decorate it. I do multi-tiered cakes. I do cakes with stuff inside of them, that kind of thing, just for fun for people. Okay, I have a very big family. And I like experimenting with different flavors and frostings and all kinds of different combinations of different textures of cakes and things like that. A sponge cake versus a cheesecake versus a regular cake, and all of these things. Okay, so birthdays come up in my family a lot because huge family. And I always have this problem that I ask the birthday person because I want to make them something special. I want to make them feel special. I want to have something that they're going to enjoy for their birthday. And I ask them, okay, what kind of cake do you want? And then they're just like, oh, I don't know, just like a chocolate one or something. And that's all I get from them. And so I've learned, and Billy kind of hit on this earlier, that she said she never asks yes or no questions. She always asks something that's leading. And this is where, okay, I promise I do have a point with the whole cake questions. I start asking them more specific questions about, okay, well, with cake, do you like chocolate or vanilla? Do you like berry or do you like caramel? Do you like, really like fluffy frosting or do you like something that's really dense? Or do you not like frosting at all? And so by asking 3 or 4 more questions, I can come up with a really, really great cake for someone. For my sister-in-law, it was, I asked those same kind of questions about what she liked. And it turns out that she didn't really like stuff that was overly sweet. And so that immediately eliminated like a bunch of cakes that I had in mind that I could have potentially made for her. I ended up making her, because she liked stuff that was a little bit tart, she liked citrus, and she liked light frostings. So I ended up making a lemon sponge cake with a blackberry cream frosting and then blackberry filling that wasn't overly sweet for her, because that's what she liked. Now, one of my brothers, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, he likes chocolate everything. So I actually have the same cake I've made for him year after year. This last time I made it for him, it was actually a Star Trek board cake. So it was a square shape and I did chocolate work on the outside. But I mean, it was a chocolate cake with chocolate buttercream and chocolate ganache between the filling and then chocolate work on the outside. I mean, it was a chocolate overload cake, but that's what he wanted. But I still went through and I asked him all those questions about, okay, what kind of cake, what kind of filling, what kind of frosting, rather than just saying, I want to make you a cake, what do you want? And that's the difference. When you start thinking about your art and you start thinking about what you might want to show someone, if you're looking for something specific and you're trying to solve their problem, you've got to ask them some more specific questions. Is there a particular technique that you're looking to add into your collection for your art, that you may not have already? Do you prefer, photographs, or do you prefer something that's painted? Do you want to buy, something that's just a print versus an original work? Asking them some more of those specific questions can kind of help lead you to solving a better problem for them. And again, even if they're purchasing for someone else, right? Because that's probably going to put the purchase into a different category.
Got any special occasions coming up, any gifts you've got to give, any anniversaries or graduations. Yeah. I mean, I had one lady who was interested in the bracelet. It was her birthday that day. She lived in Kansas and they were just there for the day. And she was, I'm going to think about it. And I said, you're going to get halfway back to Kansas. You're going to say, dang, I wish I got that bracelet. And she bought it.
I love getting jewelry on travel, on trips and stuff, because then there's always a story attached to it. I got this at this, little gift shop that was in the middle of New Mexico. And,
what kind of things do you collect now?
Yeah.
That's a really good question, because maybe they're like super detailed and you're really nice.
Yeah.
So even though she, connects with those people, there's a particular piece that caught your eye,
Right. Yeah. One of the things you can ask too is related to feelings. If you're looking, if you have already surmised that they're looking for artwork for their space and they seem to really connect with yours, find out how do you want to feel when imagine the piece on the wall. How do you want to feel about it? Are they looking for wanting to feel a sense of peace? Are they wanting to feel joy? And that can kind of help you, because you remember you're the expert on your work. So you kind of have a sense of what pieces, if the certain pieces came from an energy of wanting to have, a sense of peace or calm, and what pieces are like just so super happy and joyful that you're like, I know this is how this one feels. And so that can be another question. That might be a little tough for some people, depending on how in tune they are with their feelings. But you can also ask them, like Billy had talked about too, is how, in general, how does your home feel? Do you like really vibrant stuff? Do you what kind of art have you collected in the past? And how do you feel around those pieces? And if they have that experience to kind of work from, that might be a little easier.
Let's see, we've got a question from Bridget online. So what about asking them what in your work draws them in? Is that too pushy?
No.
No, I think that's a great question to ask, especially after you've already made the connection with that other person as a human. Now, if that's the first thing that you ask, maybe that's not the best way to set up the conversation. But I think as a secondary question or a third question, I think that's excellent because it gives you something to build on. Because the whole idea with asking these specific questions, I'm going to call them cake questions. That's just going to be a thing. Asking these cake questions is you're trying to identify customer objections before they even know there's going to be an objection, because you're getting more information about them and what their likes and their dislikes are. Because what their dislikes are is just as important as what they like. Because if you ask them a question and you see them immediately have some kind of shift in body language, or they shift in tone or something like that, that's going to tell you a lot about how you need to kind of navigate the rest of that conversation. If you ask them if they're looking for a joyful piece and they immediately are like, then you know that you need to show them something different. And that, again, we're trying to build that relationship so that you can get to the point where hopefully you can make a sale that day. If not, like I said, you just make a really good friend that's going to follow your art for a while and then buy something down the road.
And there's a longing. Sometimes people just love a piece. And you're encouraged to ask them to take it home. I had 3 objections to a lady came in just to see a piece. So she must have seen it online or an advertisement. She told me she came in just to see the piece. I said, well, it looked better at your house than it does in here. Well, she's like, oh, I'm downsizing and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, I get it. And so I was up on the ladder at the time. So she wanders around the gallery. She comes back. And I said, well, we do layaway. She's like, she already told me she didn't have room, but that's okay. So she says, well, I live in California. I'm like, oh, okay. So I gave her again space a little bit later. And then she came back and she's staring at it again. I said, well, what'd you decide? And she said, yeah, I'm going to take it. So they want it.
Yes.
Encourage them to take it home. It's going to bring them joy.
Especially if they're drawn to something.
And let's face it, folks, we all buy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We're buying stuff online. We're buying it impulse buy. It is an impulse buy.
You had a funny look there. Sorry, I'm watching body language around the room.
You always know when you're, hours later, you're still thinking about something you saw. You should have gotten it because it meant something.
If I would have, as much as it pains me how much money I spent during Small Business Week, just walking in and out of these businesses and grabbing things here and there, if I would have walked out of Billy's gallery without that painting, I would have been kicking myself.
Right. Well, and we can, so since we have that experience.
It wasn't even one of mine.
Right.
But I love it so much. It's so
we know this experience to be true, correct? So sharing those stories with our potential collectors also helps them understand the risks that they're taking by not purchasing, and helping them understand what they're missing out on. So when we can talk about it as a collector ourselves, as a customer ourselves, and just share that particular story, it takes a little bit of the pressure off of them.
I've never regretted an art purchase.
Exactly. So when you can share things like that from your own perspective as a buyer, all of a sudden you're a friend and a partner with them, as opposed to a different type of
That's right. You just
dynamic.
became a human in that moment.
I know.
You're no longer an artist that might be above the customer, because some customers, again, like, are really intimidated at the idea of buying art. And so humanizing yourself is just as important as seeing them as a human. Like, we keep coming back to this because that's really what it's all about.
And this, where are we at as far as, do we
let's
need to
see.
do
We are
group
somewhere.
discussion?
We
Oh.
kind of,
Yeah, we
we
kind
kind
of
of jumped around a little bit. So we're kind of, talking about how we solve our customers' problems.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, what Billy was talking about as far as objections goes really well into this next portion, because this is, I think, the next hurdle for artists that is like the most terrifying. Like, oh my gosh, what if they say I don't have enough space? What if they say they need to check with their husband or their wife? What if they say I can't afford it? What if they say I'm downsizing? Like, what?
We have answers for all those.
Well, exactly. So I think the key thing, there's two key things I want to make sure that we emphasize tonight. Do not let that stop the conversation. Okay? You have to understand, most likely, not in every case, because again, I'm not an expert in this. I'm only an expert in my own art. In most cases, objections are simply a person trying to put up a little space so that they can process whether or not this is something they want to do. Okay? They're not out of the game yet. So that means you're not out of the game yet either. Okay? So it's important to not let that shut that down. Don't automatically agree with them, be like, okay, and then walk away. Like, you at that point have stopped helping them. To be able to get from point B or from point A to point B, and you've also kind of shut yourself down there too. Because remember, you're serving your collector. And so part of the serving of the collector is helping them work through those objections to get to a place where they're ready to make a decision, and either a yes or a no. It could be a no, but you need to help them get through those objections so that they can make a very clear choice. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's point number one. And then the next thing to do is in these next 2 weeks, write down every single objection you can think about that you've either heard or that you can imagine in your own mind that someone's going to make regarding purchasing your artwork. Write it all down. And then start working through the solutions so that you have that all in your brain ahead of time, so that you're not caught off guard, because these things are going to come up. Like Billy was saying, she was trying to create space. She was trying to figure out, should I do this? She was like verbally processing it out loud. And like Billy thinks it's a game.
Obviously.
It's such a great game. And she's like, I win again. But honestly, like, Billy has rehearsed this, she's practiced this, she's done this. So it's easy for her to come up with those answers. Some of the things you can do too when people are coming up with objections is to ask more questions, to find out what the source of that objection actually is. So for instance, one thing you can do when someone's like, oh, well, I don't know, wall space.
You can have snappy comebacks too, like, you're just not hanging those stuff together.
Right, right. And you have to be able to gauge the customer at that point.
Right.
Certain customers, they'll feel that may offend them. So most will be fine. Okay. But you do have to kind of get a sense of what the customer needs, and vice versa. Like, maybe asking a question is not necessarily the way to do it, but this is another way that could potentially work. Is, when they say, I don't have enough wall space, well, what would you do? Like if you did have wall space, where would you put it? Get them kind of looking at their home and thinking about how they could maybe rearrange things, where they would put them, and then talk them through that whole situation. Oh, well, maybe if we move this, maybe you could give some, examples of your own experience in having to move things around. So those are some potential ideas.
Even getting them to think about where they would hang this.
Yeah.
If you had this, where would you want it to be?
That's a really good close right there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another really good thing to do, which we didn't really talk about, but it was in my mind, for wearable art and art that you handle, even paintings, depending on how comfortable you are with it, have them touch it. Get them to touch it because that's a huge connection point for them when they can do that.
There's a reason why when you go into a jewelry store and you start looking at stuff, they pull out the case and they're like, oh, do you want to just try it on real quick? You want to try it on real quick, don't you? And then you end up walking out with it.
Just for fun.
Okay, maybe that's just me because I have very little self-control sometimes. I think we've established that.
No, it's so great when you're like, oh, just touch it, put it in this other light here. Oh, let me show you how these two pieces look together. And then you can tell the stories about it or whatever. Yeah. So
Come to visit with other artists one-on-one too, and just share technique.
Yeah.
George Cole and I did that once.
Yeah.
And you get some good lines from them.
absolutely, and that we can help each other out with this based on our own experiences. What worked, what didn't work. This would actually, I think it'd be wonderful. We could have an after party after the studio tour, after we've all rested.
Yes.
So next we're going to go into group discussion. What are some common objections? We've listed some of them, but I know we haven't listed all of them. Shout 'em out.
Common objections that you
Don't
hear.
have enough room.
None of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have to ask money. We have them all. Have to ask my husband.
Uh-huh.
Don't have the money.
Okay.
Okay, space, money, other decision
Sometimes they
makers.
just say, I got to think about it.
Yeah.
Downsizing too expensive.
Downsizing too expensive. Yeah, money again.
I got a good one for the money. Yep. Where can we?
I don't wanna carry it.
Oh, I'm just looking.
I'm just looking at the great one.
Just looking. Just looking.
Sure you are. You came to the studio tour just to look.
Yeah.
Your style doesn't fit my house.
Yeah, doesn't match my sofa.
Oh, that's not the right size.
Not the right size. Not enough space. That all kind of goes together.
And what if we throw in commercial collectors here, that have a business, a bank or a hotel or medical office?
They're human beings too.
Yeah.
And they hang art on their walls.
They sure do. Yep, they are
That's a
customers.
good one.
Oh, what do we got? Let's see. I just started. I need to take it all in and I'll be back around.
To be backers.
Ooh, the be backers. Okay, so Billy and Jill know those ones. Perfect. Let me give you my information so you can find me again next weekend or tomorrow when you come back or later this evening. Can you make it bigger or can you make one like this? So it's just not right.
It's not quite right.
Yeah, it's not quite right. That's what that is. Oh, do you have it in a print?
Uh-huh.
Oh, let's see. I can get it at World Market for much cheaper. Ooh, okay. Here's a fun story. So I was a seamstress, right? And I made dresses with pockets and it took me 8 to 10 hours to make a dress plus the materials and everything like that. I'm sure you can spin that up in your head what that should cost. And I had a lot of people tell me, oh, I can get it cheaper on Amazon or I can get it cheaper at Walmart. Perfect. You're not my person. You're not my customer.
That's right.
Like if you think you can get it cheaper at Walmart and it's going to fit you this well and it's going to have pockets exactly where you need them to be and it's going to be the right color and all of these things, I'm glad you can get it for $30 at Walmart. I can't buy the materials for $30.
But you can't say that.
Yeah.
Really.
No, you
really
can't say that. But
Because it's pretty.
Yeah. But that is essentially what that same objection is, right? I can get it cheaper at World Market or any other commercial
There's a
place
good
where you can
answer
buy
to
cars.
that. Let me show you what it takes to make it.
Yeah.
Sharing the process, showing how that all works.
There is only one. That's right.
Yeah.
You will have the only one.
Yeah.
There is bazillions of those, and they're not unique. I
Yeah.
won't
How
say
many,
that.
maybe that's the difference between art and product.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Any other objections anyone can think about?
I think that was a lot of them. Oh, let's see. It's too dark. I don't understand it. Ooh, that's a good one.
I don't get it.
I don't get it. Yeah, let's just start working through these, I guess, one at a time.
Yeah.
As a group discussion. I don't know if we'll do a role play here. Do you want to do a role play
We
here?
could just go ahead. I think this is actually really our, how do you guys feel? Yeah, let's just figure out the answers together as a group. And remember, this is really important because this is a point where
Yeah, Joan, we'll all just listen in on this
we can get a little bit offensive because people are coming up with objections about something we love dearly. We've made it with our own two hands. We've probably cried over it. We've probably spent years and years developing a process for it. So when people come up with objections, we get a little angry. We get a little upset and a little offended. It's really important to remember not to take the objections personally. Because when we take them personally, guess what we come off as? I don't even have to say it. Okay.
I have that merit badge.
Oh, you do? Well, put it in your pocket and save it for after the tour.
I want to get that merit badge too.
Yeah. So it's
like selling your finger. It becomes part of you. That's so true, Joe. That's what your art is, right?
Yeah. So it just is really important to detach from that and to be able to remember that this is a person working through their own things. This is not about you. This is about them working through their things. Okay. Whatever those things are. And again, your job is to help them get through those objections to get to a place where they're ready to make a decision. Yes, it might be no. And just like Kat was saying before, if it's a no, it might just not be your people, and that's okay.
Or it might just be a no today.
It might be a no, not quite ready yet.
7
and that's
points
okay.
of contact, right?
That's okay as well. But it's really important when we're talking about these that we have the right attitude, the service attitude when it comes to dealing with objections. Otherwise, things could go south quickly. I've seen it happen in festivals.
You don't want to
lot.
look needy.
Huh?
You don't want to look needy.
You don't want to be needy, but you also
Right.
don't want to come off as an a-hole.
Right.
You know, those are the two extremes where, you know, you're desperately like, or like, I'm not, you know, I can't believe you even said that. Can't believe you even said that to me.
Go to Walmart and buy it.
Yeah. Can't tell you that. But yeah, so it is important to temper that and just to understand where you're coming from and where they're
One aspect of my business is bronze sculpture, which is high-end art, but not everybody knows it's high-end art. They're used to $20 resin tchotchkes for their dog sitter, and they come by your booth and they go, "Oh, it's so expensive." And I got so tired of hearing that, I went home and I made a notebook pictorially going through all the steps and a list of all the people that have their hands in it before it ever gets to the show.
Very
And that
wise.
really helped because then people suddenly realize,
They see the process.
wow, you've paid 11 people already and you haven't even sold this piece.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing.
And
So,
that's such a good, you know, the way you're serving them with that is you're giving them some understanding and some background. So like when you can come at it, say, let me show you like how this whole process works. It may help you understand why it is the price it is. And you know, just letting them know that because exactly like you said, they don't. You know, they're not behind the scenes seeing how it all happens. We can't assume that they're gonna understand that. We live in a world where so much stuff is mass produced and produced for so little money. Like it shouldn't really surprise us that when they're confronted with something that is far more expensive, but it has a little bit of a similarity to maybe what they'd see in mass production, that they're a little taken aback. I mean, I don't know, like, you gotta remember, they don't know the whole process.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, rather than going on my Walmart rant, I would usually kind of explain to them that, you know, hey, I've spent 20 years learning patterning and dressmaking and construction, and your dress is going to take me an hour to pattern out to your exact measurements because you're short or you're tall or you've got big shoulders or, you know, whatever. And so, you know, I estimate the construction on your dress is going to take this many hours. That's why it costs this much. That's why. But you know what? When you get it, it's going to be perfectly fit to you. And it's going to last a lot longer than anything that you're going to get off of a mass produced line because of the quality of the materials that I select.
Two, having people understand that this is it's not a hobby. This is what I do. You may go to work and you get how many dollars per hour?
Yeah.
To understand that this just isn't something we're doing on Sunday. And that we're putting the 40 hours in or whatever, and that.
Yeah, what is
That's
it?
the price.
10,000 hours to be considered an expert at something. So if you're working 40 hours a week, that's at least 5 years of doing the same thing day in and day out. And a lot of artists I know, they kind of gradually transition into their art. So they're, working something part-time and they're doing their art. So for you to become an expert at your art is probably going to take you longer than 5 years. I guarantee Don doesn't just go out and snap photos like someone, on Instagram and stuff. Like, he's spent years refining his technique to get the right lighting, to get the right framing for the shot, all of these things, plus, all of the biking.
That's right. It's not a cheap message.
Question around how much to say, here's my human DNA in this, that a part of me, both physically and emotionally, and all of these things are in this piece. So you're not just getting something a robot dropped resin into a mold.
Yeah.
You can tell a story, about somebody else. For instance, for me, I'm getting rid of some of my just regular molds because I want things of beauty that somebody made locally. And this bowl that Pyrex bowl, it's okay for it to go away now because I've got something prettier. I'm at the stage of my life that I can get pretty things.
Right. You want the things that you have in your space to be meaningful to you.
Which also kind of goes to the downsizing, Well, I can understand that when you're downsizing, what you have in that space, you want to have purpose.
You want it to be special.
Right. To be special.
And this is where, when we think about overcoming objections, the power of that story that's attached to that piece becomes so much more powerful, right? Because the thing that you buy for $15 at Walmart, the little, knickknack or whatever, the little resin pour or something, that doesn't have a story to it. But if you're able to connect with that person and share what that story is, at least they're going to understand it. They may still not buy it, but at least they're going to understand it.
I do have to say though, I think of Loveland being such an art community, I really believe people are starting to appreciate art and the good things that we have around the community. And I'm not in the art gallery day to day and hearing people, so I'm fortunate not to have all those experiences that you probably are frustrated at times. But I think just generally, especially on the Loveland Art Studio tour, people are very respectful. And they are not out to bash the price for you or whatever. I mean, they're very appreciative. So,
I agree.
Yeah, I think
we're
it's
very
a different
fortunate to have our
environment.
community. But this side,
Yeah.
Also, I think on this, it's too expensive. I mean, I've started writing down, well, okay, what have I got in gear and website costs and taxes, and my time is worth X dollars per hour and so forth. But I think if no matter what you do, you can go online, go to Google or go to YouTube, just ask that basic question, because there's zillions of artists around that have struggled with that. And you probably get some great ideas about the things that you want to be prepared to say, even whether you need to or not.
One of my closes or comments on that is somebody at $1,000 painting. It's only $2.76 a day over the course of the year. How much you spend on coffee? When you go out and have coffee, $2, you probably will have it for more than a year. Now it costs less, and you're going to enjoy it way more than you would that.
How much did you buy over Facebook over the last 2 years that didn't fit, was the wrong color, had crappy material?
$2.76 a day for $1,000.
Yeah.
One thing that I think is really important though to remember is as we're talking about pricing of things, we need to remember that we're not justifying the pricing. That's not going to resonate with the customer. It's like, they don't care how much you spent on materials.
No.
They don't care how much time you spent on something. They don't care how long you've been doing it. What they care about is the value that you're bringing to them with the artwork. So your job, when we're talking about price, is to help them understand that the money that they're investing in that piece is giving them something of value that is way beyond what they're paying. Okay? And that's where the story comes in. That's where understanding how they want to feel about the artwork comes in. That's where when we start talking about like, what problem are you trying to solve? That when you can relate that piece of artwork back to how that solves that problem, they don't care about the money anymore, because they realize once you start talking with them a little bit more, they start to understand the value that they're getting. My business coach that I work with, she sells paintings for $5,000 or more. And she has no problems doing those, okay? One of the things that she talks a lot about, people come into the counter and be like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive. She's like, I know, isn't it? It is such a great priceless value. Like she doesn't shy away from that at all, because she feels she is giving them the absolute best price for the value that they're getting. And so one thing to really keep in mind too, and this is probably a completely different topic, it is, but make sure that you feel that exact same way about your own pricing, okay? Make sure that you can feel that confident, like you have no idea what kind of deal you people are getting right now, okay? That's really important, because if you're kind of feeling a little bit timid about how much you're selling something for, or you feel,
see it.
yeah, or you're feeling resentful that you're like, I'm like giving this away, like that, they're gonna sense that you're not gonna be able to answer those objections as well.
So one of the things that Bridget kind of was talking or mentioned is that free markets can be brutal. So, that's not necessarily what the studio tour is. That's, a different environment. You can use these same tools in a different environment. So this is kind of like the studio tour is a little bit of a softer step into that, especially if this is your first foray into really selling your art. Because some of you, I think it is your first time on the tour and things like that. So, it is a little bit different environment. Like Billy said, they are coming to actually look at your art. These people are intentionally coming to the tour, unless of course they just happen to stumble in there. But I think that the majority of the people are going to be intentionally there to look at art. So the objections that you're more likely to come across, like the be back soon, I'm just looking, oh, I need to ask husband, spouse, partner, dog, if I can use my checking account kind of thing. So you're more likely to encounter those kinds of objections as opposed to just the price question. So let's think about some of those other objections here, especially like, I think the be back soon is easy enough to address. So let's save that one for last. Let's talk about the I'm just looking, or it's not the right size. Let's talk about those kinds of objections. Why don't you lead us off with some of this?
I let people take things home for test drives. I don't know if it'll fit. I would secure it with a credit card expiration. I'm assuming most of you guys can ring up things on credit cards, even if the card is not there. So you can test drive it. You can take it home, show it to your husband, try it in a couple of different places that you're thinking about. Oh, really? So that it takes the fear away. Now they're not buying it; they're just trying it. And again, that's that touching it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, putting it in your home. I had a commission client that we looked at. We're finishing up the piece, and we looked at it in MySpace, and they were like, like they just didn't seem very settled about it. And then, I said, well, why don't you take it home and live with it for a little bit and see if there's anything you want changed on it. So as soon as we got it into their house and their lighting, they loved it so much more. She made a space for it on the mantle, I think they're probably not going to need anything changed on it because we got to look at it in their space. So that can make a huge difference.
Michael says that some people are just come for the cheese cubes and wine.
That's
on the
true,
tour.
that's true.
And that's okay.
And that's kind of the I'm just looking, right? You know, I'm just here for the food.
Well, and when
The cake. The cake. If you have cake, Michael, I will show up wherever you're gonna be. I will be there because I like cake.
What would the perfect, if you were, class, what would the perfect goal or the perfect pattern for your space look like?
That's a really good way to kind of suss out that, the whole like it's not the right size or it doesn't match my sofa kind of objections, right? Is to say, okay, and Amelia, you said something very similar to this, especially when it came to like the wall space and stuff.
Yeah.
Because those are
What would
all
this
very
look like? Yeah.
related objections.
Mhm.
So while they seem like they are completely different objections on the surface, when you really get down to it, they're just figuring out how it could actually work in their space. And this goes back to that whole you are the expert kind of thing, right? So you've got to drive that conversation back to how you can solve that problem for them. Because really that's what objections are. They're just problems that customer hasn't solved yet. And it's not to say you're going to solve every single problem for the customer, but asking them what would be the right bowl for your space. Where would you hang this if you did have the space? Where could you see this piece living in your home or in your office? Those kinds of things will get them thinking about it. And it brings that kind of realism back to it.
So one thing I would say too, like the objections about like, oh, I need to ask my husband. I need to think about it. So those are indicative of a bigger problem. The bigger problem is they don't think they can trust themselves in making this choice. They just don't know if they can do it. So one of the things you can do with those objections, as we're talking about the other ones, you're starting to help them build a trust for themselves as they're imagining this piece in their space, as they're talking through what exactly they need. So just understand that when they're coming up with those objections, sometimes they really do need to converse with their significant other or whatever. But in a lot of cases, it's because they're like, I'm afraid I'm gonna mess up. I'm afraid I'm gonna make a mistake. That's what they're afraid of.
That's the nice thing about the test drive.
Right. Yeah, it's the nice thing about the test drives, but you can also in that time help them build confidence in their own buying choices. And that's where, again, like we talked about, know what they're after. If they're after something that is going to make them feel joy in their living room and it needs to be this particular size or whatever, helping them find those pieces and talking through, well, what do you think? Does this help? How do you feel about this one? And when you start engaging with them about the things they've already expressed that are needs that they have and ways that they can solve their problem, they start to build in their ability to actually, I know exactly what I need, and you can help them through that process. And again, that's just kind of guiding them along and helping them move through that process.
Yeah, the think about it objection too. I just need to think about it and then be back soon. So those are related. Before we dig into that, Don, do you got something to add?
Just real quickly, it's amazing how many people are value oriented towards a deal. And I think if you say somebody, well, I need to talk to my husband or whatever, it just I think you could just say, look, come back within the next hour. Let me write down your name here. I'll give you $10 off or $20 off. You'd be surprised how many people, oh my God, if they can save $10, they think that they've really done something. So
That's one of the things Joan is asking.
Yeah, haggle
Yeah.
prices.
Haggling prices and
Yeah.
things like that. So that can be a slippery slope, yeah, for artists, because you might unintentionally start to devalue yourself. I mean, you're there as an artist.
Well, I think you
know,
make it
and-
very limited if you're in a studio tour and say, hey, it's 3:00, be back by 4, I'll knock 10 off or 20 or whatever makes sense.
I would say to
Wouldn't have
use
to
that
give a
with,
lot of money.
yeah, and I would say to use that with caution. So I get a lot of small business owners that come to me and they're like, hey, Groupon contacted me and they want me to do a deal on Groupon so that I can sell my massage services and they're going to take a cut and I have to offer it at a discount and blah, 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 blah. You know, if you have to discount it that much to get someone to buy something, are they really going to buy something from you again? Are they really your person? Do they really, really want it? So it's a really fine line to walk.
If you set something up ahead of time and just say, if you buy this during the studio tour, you get, I mean, it'll be, it's a certain price, or it's a discount.
Yeah, and
if you set, if you set it up ahead of time, not after, or not to negotiate during the sale, but that's your special.
Well,
And
and
have a special sometimes.
a special for the tour is a good technique to use. Maybe don't have it advertised in your booth, but have it in the back of your mind that you have everything set so that you can offer that. Or something that Billy had mentioned last 2 weeks ago in our Staging for Success is say, you know what, hey, I understand that you might need to talk to someone. While you're out talking to someone, I can offer you a cash discount. If you want to come back with cash in the next 2 or 3 hours, then I can offer you X% off or X dollars off, so that you avoid a credit card transaction and you get them back in the door at a discounted price and you're offering them a deal. So, that kind of hits a few different points there. But that's something, again, that you need to be prepared about when you're thinking about these potential objections for the studio tour. It plays into your pricing, it plays into your objection strategy and things like that. And if you are going to potentially be able to have any wiggle room on any of your pieces.
Yeah, be very careful about discounting, just because you don't want to end up resenting that.
Devalue your art.
You can devalue it, and also a lot of times, like, if you're not careful, and again, this is a case by case thing. This is every artist needs to figure this out for themselves. But sometimes when you start playing that game of oh, I'll give you this much off or whatever, all of a sudden the whole energy of it has changed. You're no longer the expert. You're the one being helped. And so then the customer feels put upon, like, and they start backing away, like they can feel that way. Not necessarily, again, this is a case by case, but just be careful because that can come off in a way that can be
well, we've got
not really what you want.
That spectrum that you were talking about too, the needy versus the drunk.
Yeah.
What I find is, it's usually the client that asks for it. It's not something, at least I offer up. They will engage in that discussion.
Well, and having like being very clear with yourself ahead of time before you get into a situation where you're like, this could make or break the sale, so I'm going to offer it at half off. Okay. But have it in mind ahead of time what you're willing to do. Are you willing to do discounts on multiples? Are you willing to do layaway at like 0 interest? Are you willing to do 10% off or 20% off a certain size or whatever? Just make sure that you feel really comfortable and at peace with whatever you decide, and then you stick with it. Yeah. Don't start. Yeah.
Next level also could be redirecting them into something that is more in their price range.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they're really trying to haggle you down significantly on a piece,
right?
You know what? Maybe this isn't the right piece for you, but I have something similar over here that you might love that I think is going to maybe be in your price range if that's really what's stopping you from taking it home today.
And I think it's important to have maybe some unframed studio works.
Yes.
I've bought a lot from artists that they've got them in bins, they've got them in sleeves.
Yeah.
And maybe they were just practice, their own practice. That's gonna be in that collector's range.
Yeah.
Last year I was at the studio tour and it was a painter. And on her wall, she had like this painting, $850. Then she had that crossed off in red and then down to 400, and what she told people was, it's not worth, well, that's what she really was saying, but what she was saying to potential customers was, well, if it were in the gallery, that's what it would cost. But I don't have the gallery costs.
So it's not worth what they charge in the gallery.
It's not worth what they're charging in the gallery. Will she make another sale from this person? Probably not without expecting that kind of a discount.
And not recognizing in herself that you are being the gallery when you are the one selling it. You've done the paperwork, you've done the insurance on it, you've done the space for it. All those things that a gallery takes care of, you've done. You've advertised it, you've had it photographed, you've done all these things. You deserve to be paid for that time that you put in, which is what the gallery is getting paid for. So you can't just go and slash everything down. It just makes your work so undervalued then.
Hey, Joan, online, you said, no, don't do that. I want to make sure that we address whatever you were terrified about us not doing. Was it the slashing of the prices or marking something through with red? You want to unmute yourself.
Yeah,
marking it down in red. Yeah. So
Yeah.
no, don't do that.
Plus, if your gallery ever finds out, you will be blacklisted from all galleries anywhere because they talk to each other and word will get out and they we know working.
Yeah.
And artists do that online too. They'll say, this is what it would be in the gallery, but
Here's our online special.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe
So-
not the best idea.
One thing too, that you could go ahead and say, like if someone needs to talk with a spouse, you could actually ask them, well, what do you think they'd say? Just have
Or
them
say, hey,
imagine that out. What do you think they'd say about this one? Like what would their, what are the questions that need to be answered? Maybe we can talk through that.
And if you're feeling really bold, say, hey, well, while we talk about the piece a little more, why don't you send them a picture real quick?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
see what they think and
Yeah.
and take that opportunity to engage them while, they take the picture, they send it off to so-and-so, their dog that's going to make the decision for them. And then keep that conversation going with them about, the origins of the piece or the technique or something that you've learned about them as a human, to keep that conversation going for just a little bit longer.
Yep.
Because, I mean, statistically speaking, 90% of text messages are read within the first 30 seconds. It's insane how quick people read their text messages, and they read them from people that they know even faster. So chances are, if they're sending something off to a spouse or something, unless they specifically say, oh, well, they're 12 on, 12 off firefighters, they never check their phone during their shifts,
And by the
something
way,
like that.
That's a good way to invite people to the gallery too.
Mhm.
Just a reminder, you can the studio tour this weekend. You've got all these contacts there, invite them that way.
Well, and guess
And
what?
don't do it as a group, just do one-on-one.
Yeah, and guess what? If they took a picture of it and they sent it to someone, guess what they have on their phone now?
Now they're thinking about it.
Now they're gonna go back to that picture and they're gonna look at it and they're gonna think about it more. So this is where the be back soon and the think about it's come back, right? Is because if they're saying they need to ask a husband or a spouse or a wife or something like that, what they're really, ultimately saying is be back soon underneath the surface, right? So if they have a picture of it and they're looking at it, that's those additional points of contact that you don't even have to do anything for because they have the picture on their phone. Okay, even better if you hand them a postcard like Billy has. And that's actually, so we probably have to get to the point where we're wrapping up because we're almost at 8:30 and we've had such good conversation. I want to make sure that we don't miss
Make
the
a new
last
tag,
part of
she
stuff.
said.
Yeah,
New tag.
make a new tag instead of, yeah.
Except
So-
that she was trying to get across that she was giving them this great deal. But it
Yeah.
has backfired.
Yeah, it does backfire. So let's talk about a little bit that whole closing of the sale. 'Cause I don't know if we're going to get through everything. I'll just say real quick on the back page, there's some tips to get ready for the studio tour and some of the things we've talked about, some of the things we haven't. But let's talk about closing the sale. So Amelia, you've had some really good stuff here.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about the no. What about the yes?
Okay, so you've talked through the piece. They're really into it. They've sat there, they've looked at it for a while, they've touched it, they've tried it on, and they're just like, you can just tell they're like really, really excited about it. So when you get to that point, this is where you start moving into a closing mentality. Like this person, it seems to me like their problem is going to be solved by purchasing this piece. So now it's time to help them finish solving their problem. Okay. So from here, you can I don't know where my notes went. Oh, jeez.
No, you're right here.
Oh, really? That's where I am? Tips for closing. Okay, that just is a little incredible. And Billy had talked about this before. You can say, you know, like, hey, do you want me to take that down? I can wrap it up for you. You know, just find out. Get the yes or no. You know, because at that point they're ready to make a decision. Or they're really close. If they're still him-hawing around, you can say, hey, maybe a couple minutes to just kind of think about it a little bit. But you do need to make that move. You need to go ahead and say,
Even just saying, what did you decide?
yeah, exactly. So what do you think?
Because it is a decision.
Yeah. What do you think? And so you can find out, like, do you want to take it today, or do you want me to deliver it after the studio tour? That's another thing, you know, we talked about during the staging thing, is figuring out, you know, do you want to deliver things after the studio tour to locals, or do you want them just to take it off the wall? You know, so knowing that ahead of time, but asking what will serve them best. If it's something that, you know, they've got a lot more places to go, well, hey, I'll put a sold sticker on it, and you can come back for it whenever you're ready, or I can deliver it for you. And so, you know, asking those type of questions. And then also, like, when it comes to, you know, finishing up and closing up a sale for that work is, you know, as you're wrapping it up or as you're taking it off the wall, give them information about caring for the piece. You know, like with pottery, this is, you know, great time saying, let them know how they can care for it and take good care of this investment that they've made. That's something that, like, when I give people resin work, I let them know, like, hey, if stuff gets on it, you can just Windex it off with a polishing a microfiber cloth. Or if something would happen to it, bring it back, I'll go ahead and I can recoat it with resin. That'll fix any kind of problems that are on it. And they love that. So like, oh, thank goodness, you know, like, this isn't something that I'm making a huge investment in that I have no idea how to take care of. So do those things, find out if they want a receipt, or if they, do they want a paper receipt? Do they want something via email? Getting their information is really helpful. So then that way you can send them a thank you note. Or if you're delivering the piece, you know, that way you can get where they need to go. And letting them know about, you know, the next events that are going to be coming up. And so my big thing that I love doing after a sale is I love congratulating them, because they did a huge thing. They bought an original piece of artwork, and it was way harder for them than it was for you. I'm serious. Especially if they've never done it before. So congratulating them on their decision helps them to feel like, oh my gosh, you're right. I did a big thing, you know, like that really just kind of continues to build that rapport with them. It really is a great way to kind of close everything out until the next time you see them.
So, you know, on that whole being the helpful expert and everything, Gloria has a great suggestion to offer to help them hang it in their space. I know nothing about hanging art. That would mean a lot to me as a customer. My boyfriend does wood turning, so he gives a small little jar of wood butter anytime he gives a wood gift. He doesn't actually sell his pieces or anything, but just something to help take care of the piece better. So think about your own art and think about if there's any little extras like that that you can do to help your customers feel extra special and that you really care about what you're selling them. Because, you know, you just sold them your finger. Right? Like, it's a part of you, you know, that you just sold them. So helping them take care of it will reinforce that connection with you. And I think that that's all really, really important because, again, we're humans talking to other humans here. That's really what it comes down to. And if you do get to the point where you've hit a hard no and they're not going to purchase right now, you know, always keep that in the back of your head. They're not purchasing right now. Still get their information. Billy actually made a really great suggestion 2 weeks ago about, instead of saying, I'm going to add you to a mailing list, I'd like to put you on my invitation list. And even using that as a rebuttal to an objection, like, hey, I understand this is a really hard decision for you to make right now. Can I get your information so I can keep you on my invitation list to keep you in the loop about, future shows and things like that?
Right.
That is a perfect way so that you can continue to build that relationship with them, and keep them engaged in your work long term. Whether they're saying yes or saying no. Before they leave, hopefully you can do that. And at the very least, you should be giving them your information or give them a card so that they can come back. Because if they are truly saying, oh, well, I'm just looking, I'll be back later, something like that, then they need to be able to find you again.
Especially through the website.
Huge. Yeah. A website's something. Let's see here. Let's see. Megan online said she had another artist tell me his insurance didn't cover the installation. Huh, that's
What
interesting.
kind of artwork?
I wonder what kind of artwork that was.
It could be outside the realm of liability.
Yeah, and
Photography.
Photography, huh?
well, that would have to, I guess, be a personal choice. I've never had insurance stop me from but I mean, I've also never
Well,
had
you're personally insured, but the artwork may be under your liability at your
at your
studio.
space.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Honestly, I feel like that's probably a risk I would be willing to take to meet the needs of a customer, but I mean,
Well,
every artist has to kind of
Hopefully
decide.
they have liability insurance on their home. Right?
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
I think so. Yeah, that once it's under their, once it's purchased by them, that'd be
It's
covered by
covered
their
under their
homeowners.
homeowners.
Yeah, I would
They're
say.
Schedule C.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, I think the big thing to remember, like Kat was saying, when it comes to a no, is to keep engaging with them. Just because they've said no does not mean you can treat them less than human anymore. Okay? There's
no, not right now.
yes, exactly. And I think it's also really important to not take that no personally. Because you don't know their circumstances, you don't know what their likes and all their dislikes. Maybe you don't know exactly where they're coming from. And so it's really important to remember that it doesn't mean that your artwork is not good. It doesn't mean that you are not a good customer engagement person. It doesn't mean any of those things. It doesn't mean that, your studio wasn't set up really well or that you served rotten food or anything like that. That no is simply a circumstance that happened and you need to detach from it and say, and
Thank them for their time, though, make sure you thank them.
absolutely thank them for coming in. And if you're struggling with that, think about all the good things that came from that. I engaged with my doctor the other day about the art studio tour. And, he didn't automatically say, oh, hey, I want to buy some artwork or anything like that. But I took notice of the engagement points that we did have, and how I was able to build that relationship with him. So he wasn't a yes at that point, but it was really great to think on the other side of it is we engaged more. I have more of a connection with him than I did before I came into the doctor's office. And you can look at your nose that way too. And just remember, your art is not going to be everybody's favorite.
That's because, thoughts on encouraging them to like you or sign up on your website newsletter. I personally am more of a fan of you getting their information rather than you sending them to your social media. Because when you have their information, you kind of own that information. If you send them to your social media, you don't have control of it. If Facebook decides tomorrow that they're going to start charging anyone who has a business account to access any of their contacts, then boom. They're modifying their business portal. So if you do have a business Facebook page, you're going to see less and less data in the future. They're limiting the access to all of those analytics in the sense of customer privacy and everything, but it means that you don't have control over that data. So it's much better to engage with them and collect their information so you can add them onto your email list. You can add them onto your physical mailing list rather than just sending them generically into social media. Because let's be honest, when you're told as a customer, like me on social media, how often do you really follow through on that? You don't. Most of the time you don't, unless you've had a really stellar experience.
And if you find out what people are looking for, and it's not in your studio, recommend
Yeah.
other places, because you're helping another artist in town, you're helping that customer find somebody.
You're solving their problem.
You're solving their problem. I had somebody come in the other day and I said, well, there's a gallery around the corner, Lincoln Gallery, and there's one right down the street. And they go, oh, are you all connected? I said, no, we're just friends. They go, I like that.
Yeah.
We're helping each other. So if it's not your place, send them to another place where they can find what they're looking for.
And especially since you guys are all on the tour. You're all in this boat together for the next couple of weeks, right? So definitely referring to the other people too. Like, especially if you're having those conversations with that human and they say, oh yeah, you know, I really like stuff that has this kind of an aesthetic to it. Oh, well, you know what? I know that so-and-so that's set up over here has exactly what it sounds like you might like. So make sure you go over there. And if there's a map of the studio tour, if you can circle it on there. Yeah, or send them to the
apps
website.
are all updated, so you can look on there and see
Who's on the tour and
next
stuff.
to you.
Yeah. And direct the customer over to that other person, because that's just going to emphasize the value that we all create for each other as artists.
And people will remember that. While they might not necessarily be your people, all of a sudden you
They're gonna
did
remember
something.
you helped them.
Yes,
Mhm.
you all of a sudden are someone that really helped them.
Yeah.
And they're gonna talk about you.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then they're gonna know somebody who might have the right kind of spot for it
Absolutely.
and say, ooh, we saw this work at, you probably really like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It just makes everyone friendlier.
Are there more brochures?
Yeah, yeah. So,
I think that's pretty much all we have, other than make sure you practice all of this stuff and your payment transactions. We've got some tips that we kind of summarized on the back for what you need to do to get ready for the studio tour. So a lot of this actually grew out of the conversations with Billy during the Staging for Success. So for, you know, money stuff, you got to make sure you have cash for making change, a receipt book, online and offline payment options, a backup battery if you need it, pens and pencils. Your sales stuff is going to be your pricing list, your packing materials, shipping options, understanding that, an invitation list to collect that information from the people that are visiting you, and the new friends you're going to make, extra works to display and swap out. Your sales helper, we talked about the power of having that helper 2 weeks ago, because they will help you as you're processing sales and things like that. Yep, and that way you can keep engaging with the customer. And then just ambiance kind of things. And some of those are self-care as well. So water, snacks, that kind of thing. And your giveaway items or your postcard so that they can find you again.
there is on the private Facebook group, I did put up a checklist. So it's basically, it's on the website. And it's basically just a downloadable PDF you can print out or keep on your phone just to keep track of everything.
You might know about doing the test drive. I basically secure it with a credit card, so you need to get their credit card number, their expiration, that 3-digit code, and their zip code, so that you can run that transaction through your Square or whatever credit card method.
Manually.
Or you can get a check from them, blank check that they're not gonna cash, not blank, but for the amount what it would be. And you just, yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so the checklist is there for you to use, so that as we get closer to the tour and everything's rumbling around in your head, you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot like so much stuff. It's there to help you.
You might know about the social media templates on there too.
Yeah, so there's also for doing social media promoting, there are little graphics on their templates that are put together through Canva that you can go ahead and plop your images in and your studio information and go ahead and use them on social media. That's all on the website as well as the private Facebook group. And there's also a tutorial connected with those templates so that you can understand how to do that dropping in updates. So yeah, the last thing I would say is when it comes to customer engagement, just make sure you're yourself, because people, they're coming to see you, so just be yourself. People can smell fake a mile away, just like BO. Okay, so just keep that in mind.
That's a good bumper sticker.
Yes, it is. Yeah, don't be fake, people.
Well, thank you all very much for allowing us to be part of this. We'll end up processing this and then we'll send out the video too. So if you were online, you can watch it again, or you can send it to a friend that maybe couldn't make it to these sessions. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. Thanks everyone online. I really appreciated your engagement with this.